Okay. So thank you, Ruth, so much for having us and taking the time for the conversation with us. And we're very excited to share a few things about the Institut für mobilen Lebensstil, which is an institute that we founded a few months ago. Yeah, we'll briefly introduce ourselves. And unfortunately, one of us is missing. It's Stefanie. And she sends her regards. She's a bit ill. She has a tooth problem. So she's really sad that she can't join us because, yeah, she was actually the initiator, the first initiator for the Institute together with Anne. So it would have been good to have her here. But
well, I hope she gets better soon, but thanks for having me.
She sure will. Great. Yes, so I'll let somebody else start with the introduction. Maybe Ruth, you want to say a few things yourself first? I know you from our last conversation, which was really pleasant. But
that was fun.
Others.
Well, basically, I was born and raised in Nigeria, in Kano in the north. My father had been born and raised as a U.S. American in Iran. It was Persia at that point. And so I was the child, already second generation of someone who grew up cross-culturally. Then, long story short, I went to boarding school at 6, which is part of my story. And then my mother homeschooled us after that for a while and came back to the States when I was 13 and did my reentry like so many have done. It was not easy. And then I married my husband and we went, and ultimately we went back to Liberia, where I raised my kids. And since 1985, I've been back in the States. And since 86, I've been living in Indianapolis. And the outshot of that was in 1984, our daughter was going to go ahead of us for a few months because things were changing in Liberia. And I had sort of this massive reaction. And I finally figured out it had to do with my leaving when I was probably in boarding school. And so I started journaling and started to understand for the first time that despite as much as I loved my life, and it was a wonderful life, the cycles of separation and loss had been significant for me. So that's how it all started. And then ultimately I met Dave Pollock and he had done the Third Culture Kid profile. And I went to a conference and he said I should try and publish my journaling. And so that came out in 1987. And I began to hear from people around the world saying I thought I was the only one. And so that was the beginning. And then one day I told Dave Pollock he needed to write his material up because people were starting to quote him. He was doing a lot of traveling. And he said, well, I don't have time. And I said, oh, I'll help you. And I didn't know how complicated that would turn out to be. I thought, he has his material all developed and I'll just write it up. But when we sent it to the publisher, he said, well, you have to explain it. You can't just describe it. So that became a 7-year journey into interviewing people like you guys are doing and trying to hear the story and trying to hear what was going on. And also that it was more than one sector. It wasn't just missions. It was business and corporate and foreign service and military. And there were a lot more people. And then as that developed, I began to hear from so many other people who didn't grow up cross-culturally because they went to another country, but they were all saying, well, I relate to the profile and what you're saying, but I didn't do it your way. How come? And that was when I tried to make a larger umbrella of cross-cultural kids to see if we could look at what's actually going on in our world with so many people growing up in different ways in the past. So that's how I got to where I am. And I'm delighted to be with you. And also I want to hear what you're finding out, because that's part of the question. How transferable is this between cultures and people? I have my opinion, but that's part of the research. I think people said to me, you're a heuristic researcher. You don't have any data, but you just listen to the story and you make conclusions. And I said, that's true. And they said, well, then other people have to prove you right or wrong. And I said, that's true too. So here we are.
Well, we're not here to prove you wrong. We're here to learn from you.
That's all right. I'm pretty, after all the years of hearing things, what I feel like now is that people are adding to the story.
Mhm.
There's a basic place that is pretty consistent. I think no matter who I talk to and what backgrounds they're and what countries they come from, there's a human element that is pretty consistent. But what I see is the complexity is getting more. Because when I was growing up, I was an American child and I went to school in a US-based curriculum. My language at home was the same as my school language. And so I never had conflict, you know, between my home culture and my school culture. And so many kids now, you know, the language at school, if they go to international school or if they're going to local schools in another country, you know, they go home to a totally different culture. And I mean, it just goes on and on. So that's becoming the interesting part to me. Well, it's all interesting. It's always been interesting. So tell me who you are and what you've learned already.
Ladies?
So then I can start maybe. So my name is Angela Schreiner. I'm currently living in San Diego with my family. So I have 2 kids, 6 and 9. They are obviously third culture kids. We lived in Belgium like from 2014 to 2016. So my son was born there. My daughter lived there as a kindergartner or as a preschooler, actually. And well, we are military. That's why we move a lot. And we moved a lot within Germany. So last post in Germany was in Bonn, but we lived all over Germany. And yeah, and I got, well, I got in touch with the topic of third culture kids because of my own kids. And when we moved to Belgium, I'm a social worker, and as a social worker, I try to kind of read and prepare my daughter, then she was 3 years old, to the adventure abroad. But everything I read was like, oh, they will be fine, they will be good, like preschoolers are adapt easily to new environments and stuff. But for us it turned out like really difficult. My daughter wouldn't adapt that easily, so she was very angry and also getting aggressive and stuff, and I was like, ooh, what's going on now? And so I started to talk to other parents because we were at a an international base, the NATO base in Belgium, and there were a lot of families there from different countries, and I started to talk to them just to feel more comfortable that I'm not the only one, not the only family having these issues with my daughter. And it turned out that there were a lot of families that had like problems at the beginning, and I was like, oh, that seems to be a bigger issue then. And that's when I started to kind of think about how to help those kids, because I'm a social worker, so I try to find ways to help especially young kids, so preschoolers, to cope with the move. And well, then I started to kind of write some storybooks to help kids to understand the situation and stuff. And well, that from that storybooks, it evolved that I created a program to support young children and their parents, of course, because it's always the parents that have to help the kids to cope with the move. Yeah, that's actually a program to help parents prepare their younger kids to move abroad. And well, that's where I come in with here with the Institute and all the TCK stuff. Yeah.
Is your work and your writing all in German?
Yes, it is all in German because I thought there's a lot of Anglo-American stuff or English stuff out there, but there's no German, or at that time, actually, 2014, there was no German material and tools out there. And I think having something in your mother tongue is maybe important for the kids. So it's, my first book is in different languages, but the program itself, it's only in German.
Well, that can change, but I do think that's part of the new that's happening, is that it's becoming a more multilingual topic, which is super important. When we tried to get the TCK book published in Spanish and French and so forth, at that time, somebody else had bought it, not my current people. And he said, oh, expats all speak English. You don't need it. I thought, what? But anyway, I just heard, though, long ago, German was one of the first editions that the TCK book was published in. I don't know if it's a good translation or not, because I've never read it. But I just this week heard they've asked to extend their rights for it. I don't know if they're going to update it. I hope they will, because they did it from the way original. So that might be. But, you know, the point is, you're right. They need, you know, books in mother tongues are terribly important. So I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah, and also some of the spouses or some mothers, they don't have like the language skills. That's what I learned actually too. So yeah, we have to offer something in the German.
No, I think my publisher was wrong about the assumption. Thank you. That's great. I'm excited for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, I can do next to introduce myself. Hello, Ruth. I'm really honored to meet you. My name is Wöste, and I am a mother of TCK, not an adult third culture kid. We lived for quite, I don't know, 12 years abroad, 4 different countries, mainly in China. In Shanghai, my first daughter was born, and then we lived also 6 years in Changchun, China. And at that time, my children were kindergarten age and primary school age. And I think I have a similar story to Angela, that we had the problems with the lifestyle, but I had no idea about what kind of lifestyle, special lifestyle did I live and did my family had to cope with. So I am a book dealer, and I started to find some helpful book, and this is by coincidence that I got your book. I have the old copy, I think 10 years ago. So I bought this, and it became kind of my Bible. I don't know how many
you can
times.
tell me if it's a good translation then.
Yeah, it is. And I read it, and it was kind of an eye-opener and a game changer. So for me, it was really important to read this. And I had the experience when I talked to other mothers, nobody ever had heard about that term third culture kids, but everybody knew this problem. So I thought, okay, there must be something to help these families. And this is how I became a life coach. So I started to help women to deal with their lives as an expat spouse, and also I'm a coach for children and youth, and I try to help third culture kids by coaching, but not that small children that is for Angela. I'm more like 8 years until young adult. So this is my personal story with 2 third culture kids. And yeah, for me.
How old are they now?
Now 16 and 14. But I still see that there are topics concerned with that lifestyle in their lives. So it's also for me, lifelong. Yeah, still as a mother, always a topic. And I started to write articles about it, and called my small coaching company, coaching for expat wives and third culture kids. And then I met these wonderful women, and now we are trying to bring this topic in the world as a bigger topic in Germany.
That's great. That's great. That's really how FIGT, Families of Global Transition, started. we were a bunch of local women, and we thought the need is here, but nobody's addressing it. We're doing things internationally, or, you know, I was doing some of that, but right here in Indianapolis, they have all these international companies, and it was like totally invisible. And so I relate to what you're doing, and I affirm it. And it's really wonderful, because a lot happens when people who have passion get together, and what you've seen is a need. And, you know, I love what you're doing. Great.
Thank you so much.
I'll give you more, you know, everything you guys say gets my mind going, so it's all right. I'll tell you more later. All right, Rebecca.
Oh, yes. You see, there's a lot of things going on my side usually. I'm also a mother of 4 children. And yeah, I always think now if it's like 3, 4 third culture kids or not, because we moved back to Germany like last year, let's say. So we have been abroad for, and they are making some noise here now. We have been abroad for 13 years. And
30?
13.
Oh, okay, but that's still
only
a long time.
13.
I was trying to think,
I'm
you must have
41,
gone when
so.
you were, no, I was thinking you must have gone when you were a child, because
yeah, no.
I was trying to make that, do my math that quick. Okay.
And we have been first in Slovakia, and then we moved on to China. Then we moved to Czech Republic, and since 1 year, actually, we are back in Germany. And my biggest daughter, the one who sits next to me now, she was born in, there she is,
Hi.
facing her mom. She was born in Slovakia, and then moved with us to China. And 2 daughters of me were born in China, and 1 in Czech Republic. So, but the littlest one actually came back with us to Germany when she was just 6 months old. Mm-hmm. So she was still little. We don't know where our journey will take us, but at the moment she's a German child. Well, yes. And for me, pretty much the same like Anne. I came across the topic when I saw my children grow up, and we figured out that there is some great advantages of this lifestyle they have, but also some difficulties they have to overcome, especially when it came to frequently meeting new friends, losing friends. You know, this is also something that is very special to international school life. Yeah, people coming, people going, and how to deal with it. And that's when I came across the topic the first time. After we moved back from Germany, I decided to become a coach also, and I actually coach now women who are working abroad. But very often these women, or these career women, they also have families. So it is a very important topic in my coaching also. And I always think it's so amazing what kind of breakthroughs we sometimes have if I just tell the women about the topic. If I just raise awareness, and then the people really are like, oh, yes, that's exactly what I experienced. And so I think it's a super important topic, and I'm very happy to meet you here.
I'm happy to meet you, and I love what you're doing. And we call that, you know, the aha moment. When did you have your aha? Because I think the biggest thing, exactly what you say, is just normalizing. Yeah. Everybody thinks, you know, I'm crazy, or what's the matter with me? What's the matter with my kids? What's the matter with my family? What did I do wrong? And once it's put in a context, it's not that some people don't need maybe professional help at some point if something happened, but I say 95% of what people, all that turmoil and all that can really be just released by understanding that. I mean, you have to figure out what to do, but at least it's nice to know that I'm part of a group and it's not just me. And so, I mean, that's huge what you guys are doing. Terrific.
And the really interesting thing is also some of these women, they are adult third culture kids.
Yes, and they don't know it.
And they don't know it. And then these aha effects are even bigger. And it's so important. So it helps so much in my work also. It's amazing.
No, it really is. I think, and I'm not saying that because we did the book or something. I think that was my experience when I found out. That's been countless people's experience before me, after me. Dave Pollock was the one who develop the profile. Ruth, you seem, develop the name, but she told me, I met her several times, and she said, it's not my job to apply it, it's my job to study it, which was fine. Somebody needs to study it. But Dave also he was the practitioner who I think was out spreading the word and then hearing the stories, developing the profile. And, as it's in those early days, there wasn't video and podcasts and stuff. So he really was, in a way, he died doing it because he would go school to school to school. And he actually got sick on the stage in the American school in Vienna. He shouldn't have gone on that trip because he wasn't feeling well. And so they took him from the stage to the hospital, and he had a blocked duct from a gallstone that hadn't been removed properly the year before and had pancreatitis. And so that was where he died. And so, I felt at that point my job was to try and keep throwing out the seeds and hoping other people picked it up as you're doing. So that's encouraging. But, it is because it gives context for all of us. And it's not the way that culture has been defined before, or people challenge that a lot at the beginning. How can you say this is something people share when they're from so many places? I said, well, I don't know, but it's because I guess they're human. And as humans, we have this need to connect and belong. And this way of living challenges that until we can find new ways to look at it. All right, Wiebke.
Yes, I'd also like to say a few words about Stefanie, who's not here, because she also plays a different role in our team. She's our psychotherapist specialized for children and youth therapy. And she has a lot of experience with cross-cultural kids, so migration, migrant kids here in Germany, and also now a lot with third culture kids all over the world, German-speaking ones. So she's the one who comes into the game when things went wrong. So we tried to work on the prevention part, and a lot of training and preparation, and also coaching. And she is the one to go to when it's serious.
I'm sorry not to meet her today. Maybe I can meet her another time, because that's a real need out there, because there's so many people who have need for that extra mile, or they don't even know where they're at, and they go to somebody like that who doesn't have any awareness. And it sometimes makes it worse, because there's the book Belonging Everywhere and Nowhere that Lois Bouchon wrote for therapists. But one of her points is that if people don't know the story, they'll pathologize the normal.
Yes.
And so I love it that you have somebody who knows the topic and is a professional therapist. That's great. Hi, Stefanie.
We very much appreciate it. Yes. She says hi. Yeah. Great. And my part in this thing is I'm the adult third culture kid, so I bring that perspective into the group. I'm also an intercultural trainer and coach, and I work with companies and do assignment preparation for several countries. And as a coach, I do one-on-one coaching for expats, so both German expats abroad, but also foreigners who are in Germany and are having difficulties with the German mentality. And also I'm focusing on reentry. So we have a group coaching program, and we've accompanied German expats who've come back from their experience abroad. And that's really interesting, because in our survey, we also asked about reentry. And I realized that although there are universal things to the reentry process, it's also country specific, because it really depends what kind of country you come back to. The challenges are really different, and the expectations and the differences in culture. So we'll share some of the results now, and you can have a look at what we found. Is that okay?
I'd love it.
Good.
Yep.
Let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Not yet. Oh, there we go. Great.
Good. So we conducted this survey among German-speaking mobile families. So this can be German, Austrian, or Swiss, throughout January through April of this year. We had a total of 172 participants, of which 96% were female. Sorry for that. We'll work on the male side for the next survey. But yeah, our network is so much made up of women, and it's also our focus group, so I don't think that's such a problem. We have different age groups, as you can see. Biggest age group is 41 to 50, so that would include us as well, right? Most of us. Time lived abroad, I found that surprising. So most of them live abroad already for 10 years or more, and a lot more than 2 years. So they all have a lot of experience. Of course, it has also an impact on the type of answers. And they have lived in 1 or 2 countries, 3 or 4, and a few less in 5 to 6 different countries, and 8% in 7 or more countries.
What?
Yeah. And in total, we had 21 questions, and we're not going to share all of them. We picked a few where with the topic of third culture kids, plays a role, so that we can tell you what we found and hear how you would, see that in the international setting. So I hope this is readable. Is it too small? Can you read the?
Put my glasses on.
Yeah, me too. But I thought about, just doing the top 10, but then I thought, oh, it would be too bad to leave all this.
No, this is good.
I'll start reading, the top 5, and then maybe you can say something, what you think about it. So what are the biggest challenges of this mobile lifestyle that you see for your children? So this was an open answer. They could write whatever they wanted. And we summarized it into these categories. And the biggest one was the lack of home, of Heimat. There's a nice German word for that. No roots, no feeling of belonging. So that's a huge one. It's a lot bigger than all the others. Second one is constant cycle of goodbyes. Friends leave, or either friends leave or we move. Finding new friends. And the fourth one is frequent changing, new schools, varying school systems, lack of support, a diploma or whatever, how you end the school. Maybe you can't go to university with that diploma and you have to do a different degree. And the varying educational levels are also a challenge. And then general adaptation problems, adaptability of the children, identification problems. Does that sound like the same in international setting?
100%. What strikes me is the reason this topic is cross-cultural and cross-national is because every single person is a human being. At their root, they're relational beings. Every one of these is a relational issue.
Yes.
The belonging, the need to belong is, if you go on to any TCK website, that is, I don't know where I belong. That the word belonging is probably, you're 100% right. That's the number one thing. And that goes to do with the identity, like we've talked about many times. But the constant cycle of goodbyes, these are all relational issues.
Yeah.
And so far, all of these, it's a relational, it's that cycle of high mobility, ours and somebody else's. And of course, it's done in a cross-cultural context, which adds another layer towards the identity, but it's still this basic cycle of mobility, I think, is what the challenge is. The cross-cultural piece, we navigate better, and maybe there's more gifts out of that. But the real challenges, I think, come from mobility. And there's another, I don't think you'd have any reason to, particularly John Bailey, I might have the wrong name, but anyway, he has done this meta-analysis of educational factors, or what is helpful in educating kids and what's not. So it's more in the international school circle. And it's not about TCKs, but what he says is the #1 issue for kids having stress in learning is mobility, just plain mobility, not even international. Because, you know, he goes through all the chemicals in the brain, but how they're being used to form relationships, and exactly what you're saying, that all the energy goes to that instead of towards the studies, you know, and so forth. So I would say you're 100% on target here.
Yes, and even the next two are also related to friendships, to maintain friendships, or they don't have a close bond with family at home, is also relationship related.
Now, that would be interesting to me to just add a question. That would put for me a why question, because that one, if I say that's new, that's not one I hear all the time, but it's something I'm hearing from the TCKs of Asia, who are going home to a different culture and language than their international schools. So this might be something specific. If your kids are going to international schools in English and going home to German, that could be a factor there, because that's one that says to me, okay, that's something I don't hear all the time. The other ones I hear all the time. So that one, and it could be just the mobility. I mean, it could be your German way of life, but that one I would be interested to know if it relates to language.
Well, we also have to maybe ask the question, what do you understand by a close bond? So
right.
Probably the expectation of a local child is to, you know, have a close bond to the grandparents, to maybe even live with the grandparents or visit them all, you know, every weekend, or see them a lot, take as secondary caregivers. And of course that doesn't happen abroad.
Well, that's the secondary part. If you're talking about, I say at home, I'm thinking going home at night. If you're talking about home in the home country,
right,
then that one's normal.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm getting my learning curves all mixed up. But, no, but if you're talking about what, but see, okay, so that also comes to the question of what is home.
Exactly.
What is another issue, a major issue here, is what is home, what my parents call home, what I call home, you know, and that is all relational too. But anyway, so that's an interesting response, just because of what does it mean and what are they saying and why. So just explore that a little bit. That's all. That's good.
Okay, let me read the next ones. So then there's language, something different. So learning multiple languages is a challenge, or keeping up with a mother tongue is often difficult.
And this is where I would say that, just as a side over here, when I say that most of the gifts are from the cross-cultural, this is also a gift, but the challenge comes because there's the mobility within the cross-cultural. Okay, you know what I mean saying? I mean, the gift is that you can learn these languages, but it's also the challenge, and it's because that you're circulating between cultures. So that's one of those that the both and both sides of it play in together.
Always this ambiguity.
Always the paradox.
The paradox, yes. Then the next one is loss, letting go, farewells at an early age. The grief, the unresolved grief. But of course, they didn't answer that, but that's what comes to mind.
Sure.
The next one, to feel at home in Germany, to keep in touch with the extended family. So
that may go back, that depending on how you define that first question.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that would be another way of saying it, maybe.
Yes, I think maybe when after reentry, to feel back at home in Germany. and to get back in touch with the extended family. I'm not sure. I translated it maybe.
That's okay. It's all a pattern.
Yes. Next one is transitions, new beginnings. No stable environment, also upon reentry. Homesick for different places. Persisting feeling of having to leave again, restlessness. Countries with difficult circumstances. So what they meant was political instability or safety. So you can't have your kids develop freely, you know, let them go out by themselves. And the last one is the feeling of being different. Yeah.
I say you're right on track.
Does it anything strike you that's missing, maybe? That you usually hear?
No, I think this is the story. When I first started getting letters from people when the first book, Letters Never Sent, came out, that's when I thought, you know, am I the only one? And I had done my own little survey with adult TCKs to find out. I was going to do a talk, and people were saying, well, you know, it's just your story, and if you hadn't been so emotional, you would have been fine, and all that kind of stuff. So, and then they were sending me surveys of younger kids they had done. Some had done in boarding school, but they also were in high school and college. I thought in high school and college, I thought I was fine. You know, I was still, everything was fine. I was more into all the positives that I had. And it seemed to me that it was after you get out and then you start to hit these things long term. Like being afraid of losing, you know, like when I get married and then I push my husband away when we get too close because I want to be ready for, you know, him to die or something to happen. And I couldn't understand that. So that was what kind of led me on. But anyway, so I did the survey for anybody. I just got as many names as I could, but they were 22 and above. And it began to be, it's like the story was all the same. I put them in age order. That was something to me that was interesting, is how at first people are kind of fine and then they start to try and figure it out, and then they wind up getting mad, and then they kind of decide they're tired of being mad, and maybe what is this about me, and you know, sort of do the process, which people of other backgrounds do too. I think there's a developmental situation there, but it feels like when I read this, I mean, hear this, that it's the same story. We have different specifics, maybe. You know, people would write me their letters because at the beginning they could only get the book from me because the publishers were all saying, well, it's not that big a story. There's not that many people doing it. And the good thing about that was people had to write me. So they called me, they wrote me, and they all told me their stories. And after a while, the stories all sounded the same, except that, and that's what you're finding in your coaching, is in the details, okay, which country, whatever this, whatever that. But it's this story, you know, I don't belong. I don't know where I fit. You know, to this day, my daughter who's 50 feels like finding new friends is a problem because she, I think, got so unsure of making friends in the process, you know, of the changes and so forth. So I think that even maintaining friendships, because we have different styles and all of these things are familiar. I don't think, the only thing that it's all in here, but the big question for so many is when people say, where are you from? But that's the feeling of belonging. But that's just as a side note, one tip I heard from parents in some meeting we had, they said, teach your kid, help your kid decide their answer before reentry, what they're going to say. Because, you know, when I said I was from Nigeria, they laughed. I was in Afghanistan, so I asked those kids, if somebody says, where you're from, where are you going to say? And they said, Afghanistan. I thought, well, you might want to think about that question. I mean, if you want to say that, I told them you can say that. But you need to understand, people won't understand what you mean by that. They'll think you mean you're an Afghan. And, you know, so right now we're having some wars with each other. And so it might be a question, at least, you know, think about it. So, but that's all in there. No, I think you're right on track.
Yes. let me jump to the next one.
Yeah, good job.
So we asked them for all different kinds of support that they received by the company that sent them abroad. There were many answers, but we just, filtered the 3 answers that had to do with their children. And so a lot of companies pay school tuitions. That's like 47%, which I think is a lot. Could be 100%, but yeah. There were many self-initiated expats among the ones that we interviewed. So obviously they don't have a company that pays for the school per se. But then there's like 5% that get a little bit of an orientation talk or orientation which school to choose. And 3% had assignment preparation for the children.
Kind of pitiful.
And this is where Angela
No, it's pitiful.
Yes, it is, totally. And I think this is also a German and also, I think this is very...
Well, also, the question is, which sector are you going to? This is very sector specific.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the groups that did it the longest saw the need a while back. Military in the States anyway has their family program. I don't know that they've always done everything for kids, but they are now. I think they have programs that they've initiated, for the families and so forth. The Foreign Service has their, I forget what they call it, but anyway, I'm talking US now. They have had that, but see, Dave Pollock was going to them early on. He was working with a lot of people in these groups in the States, and Missions has had it, for a long time because it's been going on a long time. They didn't have it for a long time. When they had the first missionary conference for missionary kids in '84, Dave was told he couldn't have anything about the emotional, because the kids were fine. They could only talk about the educational part. So it really wasn't until the conference in '87 that even Missions really started opening up to what can we do for the kids, because the same thing that maybe you all heard when you say about the positives, all the early books were like, we're all fine. And because people look at the outside, but also people weren't telling the understory. Like for me, if I would say that I had a problem, then my faith is a question, my parents are a question, because the whole mythology was we were all fine, even though we went to boarding school, because you quit crying, and nobody understood about detachment and how you can detach and wind up, being fine externally, but not so fine internally. But I think corporate, let alone independent, they started it a little later. And I think their orientation is not so much on the people as much as the job, which the other organizations can be too. But, in the Foreign Service and in the military and mission, maybe it's more organizationally a family sense. You stay with it for a long time and things like that. So that whole thing started sooner, but corporate has been the hardest, because the first thing is when corporate even hires people to do programs in the States, almost none include the family. Almost none. And when I try and say to some of these relocation companies, blah, 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 they say, well, number one, corporate won't pay for it. Number two, what they really care about is where's the McDonald's when they get there. They can find out the rest later. I don't think so. The reason the assignments fail is the family stuff. But that has been the biggest challenge. So even there, you're exactly right on target. That has been the biggest challenge.
And that's
how do
why,
we get,
yes,
organizations to understand this is important.
Exactly. And that's why we founded this institute. And as a group, we think we can reach, also the companies, and we have a stronger impact, and we can offer packages and, special programs.
Right. I think that's 100%. And you can do it in German. Nobody's even tried to do it in German that I know of. So I think that's terrific.
Yes.
And the other thing is some of the corporate adult TCKs now are growing up enough to say this is a significance. And I think that's what happened in the other organizations. They started it sooner. You know, like I was born in 45. So, you know, I did it just at the tail end of World War II, but my father was doing it before. So the impact of it maybe was seen in the adult sooner than it was for corporate. But as corporate has been doing it longer now, they're, I'm sure, seeing both the advantages and then these challenges in their own kids. And that can make people interested. There's a man who was in charge of Shell for a while, and I think he started the archive center in the expat archive center, you know about, in The Hague. And but he started it because he was aware that there was this stuff, but he became, you know, a sponsor with FIGT, and he came and spoke there a little bit because his company then also paid for the American School in The Hague to do transition and develop the transition program. So because of his own experience and then his position in a corporation, he used that to be one of the few that kind of was doing something. So hopefully this will change in a larger
That's a good
place.
point. Yes, that's a good point. So we have to look for people in the companies who have their own expat experience, and then they will they will know.
Help you then.
The next one that we wanted to share were the challenges, and the last one will be the upsides. So let's dive into the greatest reentry challenges, and one of the top 5 was about the children. So the top one is reintegration, settling in, getting used to the rhythm of life in Germany.
And that's for the adults as well, right?
This is only adults, yes.
But I think that the important thing is the reality is all of this, it affects the kids, but it also affects the families. And so it's a package deal. When I was trying to start FIGT, I'm thinking kids, because that's who I work with. And my friends were all with the spouses. They said, Ruth, if mama's not happy, ain't nobody happy, you know? And so they were the ones really pushing that it had to be a family approach, not just talking about the kids.
Yes, absolutely. So these are the answers of the adults, of course, but it can be for the whole family.
Well, if the parent's having trouble reintegrating and the kid doesn't even know, how to, you know, it does make a problem. I mean, it's connected.
The second one is, that's what I was mentioning earlier, is probably a very German specific one, but yeah, we don't know.
I think it's only German. It's German specific in terms of what's the German mentality, but I think other people have it for whatever culture they go back to.
Really? Yeah. I thought
absolutely.
German were so special that it's harder.
No, I think for me coming to the American mentality, like it's a different world than what I grew up in, you know, how people think and how they look at things and the values were so different than for me. So it's German specific in your situation, but it's universal in the sense of making that cross-cultural leap, especially to go back home when I thought I knew home, and then I've been out and I've changed how I see the world. And so I'm suddenly not as German as I thought I was, or I'm not as British as I thought I was, or I'm not as African as I thought I was, you know. So that's the challenge for why reentry is such a universal challenge, is because for the adults, especially, they think they know and they fit and they have this dream of, you know, who they used to be, but they didn't know that they had changed so much.
Yes.
And that, you know, that makes us aware of culture when we've been out of it.
Absolutely.
So yes, it's specific to German mentality for this, but
it's specific
universal.
because they mentioned exactly what they meant by German mentality, you know, this distance and unfriendliness and time management and stuff like that.
Right.
And I remember reading about an American repat who was saying, yes, I'm amazed about how Americans, you know, they're so convenient with everything, which is great. Everything is easy. Everything is, made for convenience. But wow, we don't mind the environment, right? We have so much stuff out of plastic, made of plastic, and we waste so much water and electricity. And so they have different specifics for each country.
But I'm not putting you. I think what you identified is one of the reasons that a repatriation is hard. And so you're working in German, and but that's where, if you happen to talk to somebody from another background and you're coaching, you can ask them what was hard for you. For me, when somebody had a 45-minute discussion on their curtains at one of the lunches, I thought, who can discuss curtains for 45 minutes? Because the world I was in, curtains, I mean, we've got civil wars, and we've got a bunch of other things. I'm thinking curtains are, I mean, you can cover your windows, that's fine, but it's not worth my whole lunch to listen about. I mean, it was like, curtains. Yeah. But anyway, it's a big deal.
Yeah, so it is the same. Yeah, next one is
it's specific, but it's the principle. I think the thing what you're identifying is you're validating the basic principles are there because of human experience, but then what you're translating it to, which is the need, is to the German context, because nobody's done that before in the way that you're doing it.
Yes,
and that's important. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Next one is to reconnect with friends, to make new friends, career reintegration, finding a job. And the fifth one is integration of the children. So
just in general, the idea of the connecting with friends, one thing I hear from people is they forget the world went on without them. And they also forget that life stages happen without them. So there was someone who came to me, and she'd always been close with a couple of friends. And she was so hurt that they didn't seem to have time for her. And I had that same feeling from a particular person. Well, I've got to get my kids to lessons. And they forget that in the time they've been gone, especially in the American context, I don't know about Germany, but everybody's got their kids in Little League and soccer's, and they've got 100 million things they're doing now. And they don't have time to come and sit with me like we used to when the kids were small. And the person who's coming in doesn't have their kids in all these things yet. So they're like, we're here waiting for, can we be friends like we were? And the person they were friends with, well, yeah, we're still friends, but I don't have time for you, is basically what's happened, because life went on. And so that's kind of one of the hurtful parts of reentry, I think, for a lot of people.
Yes, and I also think that, maybe Rebecca and Anne can talk a little bit about their experience with their children, especially now. Rebecca returned just before Corona, so she has 4 children.
A challenging year.
Who had a challenge finding new friends in a homeschooling environment is nearly impossible. So of course this was also a survey done in Corona times, so we have to keep that in mind. But I think it's still universal anyway.
Yeah, it's still.
But
yeah, maybe you would like to share something, Rebecca?
Yes, actually, we have have been talking about this before also, right, Wiebke? We came back to Germany unexpectedly. I think there is one topic. I have a lot of clients, and it also happened to myself, that we didn't plan to come back, but something happened. So the assignment of my husband in that case didn't work out the way we planned it, the way the company planned it. So it just ended unexpectedly. And I think this is something that really affected my children, that our parents, they give safety to the children, and we told them we will stay in Czech Republic, for example, like 2, 3, 4, 5 years as we used to. But then things change, and then this change is even more huge, I think, because it is unexpected, and even the parents didn't plan this way. That's the one thing. Then we came back to Germany, and we were lucky 2 weeks before lockdown. So we were very lucky that all our stuff and all our thing and all the moving was taking part. But it had the effect that the children went to school for 2 weeks, and then they went to homeschooling for the rest of the school year, let's say. And all these plans and experience that we had, like how to make friends, how to make it easier for children, invite other children, make a party, whatever, yeah, just to get the children into the groups didn't happen. So I think really it is much more difficult at the special times at the moment, but we can also learn from it. Yeah, what are the good things, what are the findings, what can we adapt to the future to make it easier for families. And it also affected a lot of my clients. What I didn't tell before properly is all the time we were abroad, I was working. I was a working mom abroad, which also affected the family somehow. And I think in this kind of cases, sometimes it's even more difficult for the women to really support the children in making friends, in integrate their children over there and back home. So I think it's a really huge challenge. And this question that we had here was an open question. So we didn't ask specifically for children, but still 14 out of this 174 immediately had this topic in mind. So it seems to be really, really important at this point of time, but probably also before and after. But I think we have to see how things are going to develop.
Just to take off on that, because my mind will forget before if I don't say it now. I think something that is also a useful application of all the skill sets we're learning in this whole transition idea and mobility and what we call hidden losses is that what COVID did, it put the whole world in the transition period, the phase without having a leaving phase. So you're specific because you had a traumatic ending, in a sense, you had an unexpected ending. And that is part of, how do we go back and say goodbye if we didn't get to say goodbye? But something that I think has been an application for me of everything I've ever known about transition is how the whole world wound up in transition and didn't know they were going there. And so nobody said the goodbyes. They didn't build a raft. They didn't do anything like that. They just wound up in the middle of transition. And then helping people define their hidden losses in that experience. Because, again, nobody dies. And how do you even figure out what's happening? I've seen more articles on grief now in, all sorts of places than I've ever seen before. Because people always said to me before, why do you talk about grief so much? It's so negative. I said, it's not negative. I only grieve for what I loved, but all of a sudden it's become this really hot topic but that's the reason nobody got to say goodbye properly. We moved houses 2 weeks before. And I thought, okay, fine, I'll get my neighbors. You can't meet your neighbors. And I could have gone to my neighbor at the fence where I was before. I knew my people on my street, and all of a sudden I don't know anybody. And it's like, wait a minute, what happened? And so COVID certainly amplified it, but I'm only saying it's another place, your experience there as the unexpected translates, I'm sure for you as a coach, to the COVID unexpected too. I mean, you had both.
Yeah, at the same time. So anyway,
that was good.
I won't complain, but I think
it's a lot of trauma. I mean, it's actually a lot of trauma. But anyway.
But I think it's so helpful to make this the people, and in my case it is also employees of companies who can carry it into the companies, also to just make them aware of it. Yeah, you had this transition, that transition, and then everybody is like, yeah, but I have a luxury life, I shouldn't complain because I'm not poor. But still a lot of things are going on and people have to deal with it. So yeah, it's a special time, and it's even harder, I think, for some children, or for the children Absolutely. Like my children who are now reintegrating, especially in this special time. It's really tough.
Ruth, do you have any recommendations? Yeah. I mean, you've also re-entered as a teenager. What would have helped you through your re-entry?
Well, it would have helped me to understand my story. I mean, I had no idea. what's interesting, there was one girl who came from Germany who happened to be in my public school. So I kind of became her friend and she became my friend because I think we were the two outsiders, you know, but 13 is a terrible time anyhow in life. My way then was to just pretend I'd never lived overseas when I started high school again. I just didn't tell anybody, you know, and that's what my kids kind of did. And that's okay. I kept wanting them to do a report on Liberia, and there's no way that was going to happen. And they took all my Liberian stuff off the walls so that nobody would know that we'd ever been anywhere. And I was horrified. And then I thought, okay, I know what's happening. You know, they said, Mom, we're from Chicago. Okay. I said, oh, okay. Because they didn't want to be different. And so that was fine. But so I think, you know, some things happen with time. I mean, there's things that transition, you can't avoid the stages of transition. I think helping families understand the stages of transition is what I know is what you're doing is huge, because then you can kind of say, what stage are you in? And what stage are your kids in? Because people can be in different stages in the same family. And that can cause a lot of dissonance. You know, the person who's got the job, they're off and running. They're already entered, they're doing fine. They're back in reinvolvement. And, you know, the spouse is, I was always trying to figure out, is it confection or sugar or icing sugar? I mean, I couldn't find things at the store because they called it different things and they had different pictures on the boxes. So I had to, you know, I'm trying to figure that out. And my kids are, you know, well, I mean, they're trying to find new friends and play and stuff like. So the issue of time. But what you were saying before about, you know, the unresolved grief is the number one issue that I see that keeps people from moving ahead in all of this. And one of the big things is this lack of permission, which Rebecca's talking about, when I shouldn't feel, I shouldn't. So what you said, Rebecca, is important. Maybe you shouldn't, but you do. So let's deal. And who says you shouldn't? Because look, you had 15 transitions, and if somebody else had it, wouldn't you kind of think that maybe this was a big deal? Well, for them, but not for me. Okay, well, why not for you? You know, I said that to somebody years ago, and she said, that's kind of prideful of you, Ruth. I thought, what do you mean prideful? You know, why should you be so special that you wouldn't, you know, feel all this stuff? And I thought, well, I don't know. I just shouldn't. I should be tougher than that. So what you're saying, Rebecca, is 100% on target.
Yeah.
So again, what you're saying, it's right. I mean, this is the story, and you're proving it. I guess that's the point. And that gives you confidence to work with it, because then you know when you say certain things, there's going to be resonance.
Yeah, and exactly. I think also how people deal with it or cope with it is so different, and that's also very worthful. So what we usually do in the coaching is to think about how they solved the problems in the past to make sure how they can use it for the future and stuff. But I realized that especially in this, as you said, worldwide transition, yeah, the whole situation in the whole world changed, and then this actual third culture kids, they are living a double transition at the moment, and yeah, it will be interesting in a few years what they will tell about it. Maybe we have to make a new survey then.
Well, one thing I disagreed enormously in my emotional space. Somebody sent me an article saying, oh, how this COVID doesn't affect TCKs. They're so used to moving and they're so used to transitioning. Oh. I thought, because they were saying, well, they're just used to saying goodbye and just going on. I thought, well, talk to me in 20 years about that. Because they were sort of saying it doesn't matter. They're just, but no, that's part of what becomes difficult if you learn to cut off relationships without saying goodbye. You know, that's not a healthy thing. And so they were seeing it as, oh, the kids can do fine. And I thought, no, that's part of why they don't do fine long-term. So it may seem right at the moment that they're just, you know, moving on, but I'm not sure that this is better for them. And I think what you said, Rebecca, about a double transition, yeah, you know, pay attention to that while you're doing your coaching, because that is a double transition and they're probably all mixed up there.
Yeah, because there's not only the problem of not saying goodbye, but what I figured out a few times now is that it's really hard for the children then to also adapt. Yeah, properly in the new life, let's say, because the new
Right.
life is still like it's not like it's meant to be. It's still like Ausnahmesituation, Wiebke, I don't know in English. It's
Exceptional.
still like
Well,
exceptional
yes.
stage, and then this exceptional stage goes on for 1.5 years, and nobody can give the children the safety how long it will take. The children who are in school here and have their friends, for example, really practical example, in the beginning they met in Zoom meetings by themselves because they were friends already, but who is going to Zoom with the new one, right?
Right. And I think this is another way of saying what you're saying. I think that when we talk in English about building the raft, it's reconciliation, affirmation, farewell, and then think destination. So you say goodbye, but then you think where you're going. COVID took the T out of it for all of us. We don't know what the destination is because we don't know how the world's going to look. Our kids don't know what jobs are going to be out there. We don't, that part of transition has become very muddled because of COVID. And so that's, again, a complicating factor along with everything else you're saying, they can't make the new friend in the way that you would have made it before when you say think destination. Let's get a mentor, let's do this. Like you said, let's have parties. Well, we can't do that. So we don't know how to think it. We don't have a picture of how this happens now. And I don't know the answer to that. I think maybe we all hope, we go back to something, and here we're starting to open up. I'm going to be able to go to my grandson's graduation next week, which I didn't think I could do. So, that was just a new opening a couple of days ago. Oh, they're going to let me come.
That's great. Germany is also finally opening more and more. We're getting our freedom back. So.
Well, it helps to have the vaccination in the sense that at least I feel safer, and so forth.
Yes.
So it's all good. Now, so those are positive.
Yeah. Yes, let's finish on a positive note. So what are your luckiest or happiest experiences connected to living abroad? The top 5 answers were new friendships, and on second place, positive effects on children. So there's
What do they mean by that? Did they say?
Rebecca, you did this one, right?
Actually, it has been really, I summed it up like positive effects, but it has been various answers. Mostly it was the children learned new languages, they attended great schools, they are open-minded, they turned out to be very flexible, and especially this open-mindedness and being resilient and adaptive to new situations. Also, in this case, a few times the answer was my children are really good in making friends because they learned how it worked.
Okay, and can I say one thing about that?
Mm-hmm.
Are they good in making friends in the international environment or back in the local environment? I mean, one of the challenges is that people who made friends all their lives, like for me, I never had a problem with friends. All of a sudden, when I came back to the States, I felt like everybody thought I was really weird and strange. And I made friends eventually, but in that first coming back, how you make friends can be different. Where in the international environment, everybody's moving. So you're kind of used to letting the new person in. But sometimes when kids go back to a place where everybody else was there from the beginning, it's harder to make friends. But that would be interesting to know, have they learned how to make friends locally? Because I mean, that's a skill set. That's great. You can translate that. But
it was not really asked in this question because
right.
The people who participated in the survey, they are in different stages. So I assume that most of them are still abroad and see that their children flourish to make friends in international schools. It would be very interesting, for example, Wiebke, maybe we can do something on reentry or a smaller survey on reentry, like how it worked out when they finally came back to their home country. I don't have a specific answer to this because we didn't ask it specifically in this survey.
But maybe
Well,
Anne can
no,
share
'cause there-
some
yeah,
of
go
her
ahead.
experiences with her children, because this was non-COVID times. So maybe there's a, how was it for your children?
To unmute myself. Yeah, when we came back from China, my children were 10 and 8 years old. And I can resonate with a lot of things that Rebecca already mentioned. This complaining on a very high level was something we heard very often. And but especially with friendship, I think the biggest point was that wrong or false expectations, that we try to keep our friendships also with the children from a very young age, and we visited every year once or twice our home country, and we kept connected, but still they developed in different directions and didn't really recognize it during summertime. So when we came back, they thought they will have friends, and they have their own friends and old friends, but after a few months, they recognized that there are no really connections anymore, and they are both struggle with making new friends, German friends, in every not international environment. So this is something still that keeps us busy. Friends is a big topic.
Yes, and we definitely want to think about concepts, how to help the children through reentry. You know, especially now during COVID, we were thinking let's connect them. We have a Facebook group, the Weltfrauen, the World Women, and they all said let's get a group for the world children so they can connect and help each other out through reentry, because they have no one to talk to about this experience. But yeah, it's not so easy to make that happen because of child protection laws. So as the Institute, we will be thinking about concepts, how to help them. If you have any ideas, Ruth, we'll be grateful.
Well, no, I think that it's a good idea of somehow doing some group stuff if you can. Of course, the kids always think they don't need anything, and so sometimes you have to get around. When I do international schools, or when I used to, I found the kids didn't want me to tell them what their issues were. I would make a panel, I would ask them, so what's the hardest part? I mean, they always said the same thing, basically, but well, I get to see the world, and I mean, what's the best thing, and all these things. And what's the hardest thing is the same kind of things you've had. But I think when they hear each other, it validates it. Instead of you coming in, I've seen people doing, as I used to do, coming in and saying this and this and this, and they go, no. But if they say it each other, then they also can develop parts that you didn't even know. So if you can get some group things, but then, they can also, you can have discussions. So how do you reach out? I think what a lot of us who grew up this way didn't understand was the different way we see the world because of our experiences. And so this makes it hard. Two people who have the same passport can see life very differently. Even, I don't know exactly how it is now in Germany, but putting together the East and West Germany, where the way people see the world was pretty different, even if it wasn't cross-cultural. And I was in, I guess, Leipzig. And I would say it, Leipzig?
Leipzig.
Okay, sorry. Told you I'm not very German. And I got off the train and something had happened. I thought I had, the schedule. Basically, I went from the train to some classroom without, usually I like to have a day in between and find out who's this school. So I asked my usual questions, where are you from? And almost all the kids were white. And in an international school, there's usually much more of a mix. And they were all from there, or they were all, these kids, what's your passport? And I thought, man, this is different. But it turned out that the local But I learned something. I said, so I've also learned to say what's different when you go home at night than at school, because that's how you find out, you know, whatever. And what are your friends? Anyway, one of them said, well, I never tell my friends that I come here. And I thought, that's strange. So what I found out there was that because I guess that had been East Germany, the local council wanted more kids to learn English. So they paid scholarships for local kids to go to the international school so that they could improve their English and so forth. So these local kids who were coming were in this incredible cross-cultural experience. So they didn't even tell their friends at home that they went there because they think they were rich. But it made a completely different sort of, you know, I wasn't getting the answers I always get. I thought, what happened? And then I found out what happened is it was a completely different reason the kids were in the school. So I don't know how that came. Oh, but also that then the friendships and things like that, you know, are impacted. So I don't know, but I think talking about different ways people make friends, I think a lot of TCKs think people don't care about their story, but people aren't used to asking the story. In the international community, we always ask the story because we don't know each other. But, you know, when people have lived together all their lives, they don't have to ask each other the story. So they're kind of not used to it. So my daughter found she was offending people by being too open or inquisitive. And they thought she was being rude. And I said, no, they don't mind. And she told me later, she said, Mom, they minded. I said, I'm sorry. I guess I don't know either. But that would be a good thing, is how do you help kids? First, what are the ways German kids usually relate? And okay, so I have actually a German friend that I just talked to this morning. She's a good friend of mine. She lives near Munich, and her kids grew up in one of the Eastern countries. I'm sorry. Doesn't matter at the moment. But the point is, when they came back, because they've been in an international school, their English was very fluent. And they also had an American accent. So this was a put down in the school. People thought they were snobby. And the teacher who taught English thought they were arrogant towards her or something, because I don't know. Anyway, for some reason, their English skills made them be seen as a certain way. So they kind of had to pretend they didn't know it. And that's been, I think, you know, in different countries, that can be part of it. I don't know.
You don't want to tell your kids, you know, don't tell anybody about your background. Don't tell anybody about the world that you lived in. You can't, you know, you want your kids to be authentic and to be proud of it.
I think what it is a matter of, yes, you do want them, you know, so how do you tell? How do you say it without, I had one TCK I met at a reentry seminar, and she was from Alaska. She had 5 albums of snow from my perspective. She kept showing me, and I said to her, you know, I didn't want to say all the snow looks alike to me. And I happen to be interested in your story. But I said, you know, you might want to pick a few of these pictures to explain your story to people instead of all of these pictures, because for those of us who don't know a different snow mountain from a different snow mountain, or this igloo from that one, or whatever you call it, we don't know how, we don't have context for your story. So I think that's part of it. The other thing I try and tell kids is, you know, ask them their story, because they also have a story, unless you're not allowed to ask questions. But, you know, but that's a thing for you guys to work on. How do you teach kids how to make that bridge in Germany? Because it'd be different than in Liberia. In Liberia, there would be much more openness. Everybody invites the stranger in. And in Germany, people don't, I think.
No, actually, we struggled a lot, and we just moved within Germany to a new place. And the children all knew each other since kindergarten, and the parents invited the children over, and you know, it's made by the parents, you know, fostered by the parents. So when you get there and during school age, you're too late. Everyone's taken.
Yes.
So you have to stick around with the new ones, the other new ones. As you said, you took the outsider.
Yeah.
And that's okay if it's another new one, but Dave Pollock would always tell the parents, be careful why you want a good mentor, because sometimes the outsider is because they're a troublesome kid. You know, they don't fit in because they're the troublemaker. And so they're looking for a new friend. And your kid might wind up being seen as a troublemaker if they wind up associating there. So, you know, just another piece.
But I also think it's not only the parents that are have to be more supportive, but it's actually in the German case, I would say it's also what I see from now comparing the US school system with the German school system. It's also German schools that have to change, kind of. So because in my opinion, what I experience here in the US is more a welcoming school system, and also a school system that kind of changes more often itself. So every year you get to have new classmates, what in Germany you don't have. Like usually you have in elementary, you will have for 2 years, you will have the same teacher, and for all the 4 years, you will stay in the same class with the same classmates. So there is no change in that, and that's I think that doesn't support children that come from outside the system to make new friends. It's easier here in the US to make friends because every year you get a new chance to connect with different other kids because you have new classmates and stuff, and that doesn't happen in Germany. And also the whole system is very I don't know how to say that, but it's very it's not changing in itself, so it's not embracing change. That's what I
Very rigid.
think now from
Rigid. I want to say
from
rigid.
yeah, it's so, and that makes it even harder. And I think that's a specific German thing to like decide that our culture maybe not as welcoming as other cultures are.
And the thing is, the parents are the same, and they raised up in the same, and very often they are risen up also in the same area. Like I'm in Hanover now, so all the parents from the school kids, they also come from somewhere here, and they know the other parents from school times, and then we show up like, hello, here we are. Well,
yes, we definitely should raise more awareness in schools. I mean, even international schools sometimes lack awareness about their culture kids, but also all the local schools. But yeah, that's a huge thing, right?
Well, I think when you start doing the work you're doing, you start to see how systemic this whole issue is. That for me, the schools in Indianapolis have had a hard time understanding all the new refugees we have here and the new internationals. And so that's been, and the hardest place I've ever had to do things is trying to get to the local schools, because most of the teachers never lived someplace else and they didn't do it. So this is just a tip in case you wind up. I had a chance to do something a couple of weeks ago for the social service workers for the school system in Indianapolis. They had a conference. And as it turned out, one of them, of course, had international adoptee kids. So, you know, again, she's seen it for her children, and that somehow this might be a valid topic. So they asked me, and I had a panel of 4 people. 2 were from Japan, and 1 was Jamaican British, and 1 was a Syrian refugee who had all come to the US schools as whatever. When they told their stories, I think that people got it for the first time instead of my telling for them. And so the girl from Japan came when she was 8. I mean, she's getting her PhD now. So the other point is they were all successful at this point. They've made it, so everybody could be happy. But you know, reflecting back, she came to some American school. She didn't speak English. Of course, you know, she's in whatever local school. So the gym teacher calls her mother and asks her to come to school. And so she goes, and he's pointing out that Aiko is not participating in gym. And he said, I know the language is an issue, but you know, this is gym. So the mother says, why aren't you? Well, Aiko had no idea it was gym. She said, in Japan, we change our clothes and we go someplace special and we do stretches. We get all ready. Here, they don't change their clothes and they have gym in the cafeteria. They just push the chairs over. She said, I couldn't figure out why everybody's running around the cafeteria. And so she said, my family still keeps my report card from that year when she got a D in gym. You know, but you know, she just didn't know. And so if anybody's here, they don't know. So then but she finished with a great story because I said, what could people do? And she said, well, the cafeteria lady, every day when I came by, she held up white milk and chocolate milk and asked me what I wanted. And of course, nobody spoke English, but she said, I always chose the chocolate. And the next day she always gave me a choice. She said she saw me as a person. And I thought, you know, that people can make a difference. But then the girl from Jamaica and England, she came with her parent. I mean, her dad is so high up in corporate and business and, you know, he's all kinds of things. But I think for people here, she would be seen as an African-American, you know, with all the stuff that comes with that. So she came and she took her tests and she didn't pass math. And so the school said she had to go back a grade and her mom was trying to fight with that. Anyway, she said the test was so Americanized, they had all questions in quarters in American money, but they didn't have any, you know, how many quarters you need and how many, she said they didn't tell me how much it was. I didn't know what a quarter was. I didn't know, you know, so the local school then puts her back. Then they figure out she's smart. So then they skipped her a grade later. And she said, I've been in therapy for that ever since. So then I think they started saying, oh, you know, so now they've asked me to do something for the mental health workers. And so maybe there's a crack, but I'm only saying that as a way because they had to hear the stories, not just me talking about it. But when they had these people who were in their 20s now reflecting on what it was like, then I think it started to make sense. And they probably the same people couldn't have said it. The Jamaican British girl, I used to have her come when she was in a student, you know, 20 years ago. And it was interesting for me to see the reflection, but I think she was almost more powerful as an adult reflecting back than as the child at the moment. Just saying, you know, what was going on. So that's for what it's worth. But I think you're 100% right. Start looking, how do we get to the schools? And of course, some of you might want to join the SPAN network. They're working with Safe Passage Across Network. They're trying to develop transition programs, or at least transition awareness for schools all over the world. And they start with international schools, but actually every local school in today's global economy needs to understand. But even if you don't have international, every school is transition every year. You change teachers, you change grades, you change, you know. So I think this Friday they're having what they call the nest, where they have people come and talk. But anyway, but that's a huge thing. If you can crack that nut, you will be doing a huge, 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 huge favor for your people and your kids in the world, really, because then you can share with other people, well, this is how I figured it out.
How was that program called? Did I get it right? It's
SPAN.
Okay.
Wiebke, do you get their, you can send out, because I think it's this Friday.
I know about them. I can send you the link, and I also have the book. I haven't read it all, but
no,
I can write that later in an email. I'll send you.
Well, Safe Passage is called the book by Doug Ota, and he's actually doing his PhD this year in attachment in international schools, trying to see if the theory, again, that this much mobility affects attachment can be proven in facts, you know. So it's like experientially we're all seeing it, but can he get some data around it? And he said the research is going very well. So he's had to pull back a little bit from his activity in leading this, but other people are stepping in and maybe you could all become SPAN certified or something in the work you do. I don't know. I wrote that to them this week because they were trying to certify the schools, but that's a little harder. I said, well, maybe you could certify coaches or counselors so that people would know these people. That's just a brand new idea. I don't promise I'll do that, but to me that would make some sense that you can put that on your CV, but it makes a connection for saying there's some group that's saying school transitions are important and we're here to help you, kind of thing. That's my thesis, but I don't know. I get ideas. I don't know how to make them happen, but sometimes they do.
Excellent ideas.
Yeah.
Well, actually, when I'm sitting there looking at you, I thought that would be a good idea because it would give you validity and it would help, spread that awareness. Like when we made FIGT, I just felt like we're just doing this pretend conference to pretend like, we know something, but somehow having a name helped us, because like, oh, we're FIGT.
Yeah, and also it would raise awareness in parents to kind of question what is the concept of schools, how is school supporting my child. That I was so disappointed when I went to Belgium, and I, as a social worker, of course, I was kind of curious to know the concept of the international preschool I was sending my daughter to, but there seems to be no concept. The only concept was, okay, we are offering different languages and that's it. And I was kind of disappointed, but I also learned that not every parent was that curious, because of course it's my social worker background why I'm interested in those concepts. But most parents didn't question or didn't even ask about the concept and how it supports their children in transitions and stuff. And I think it's important to raise awareness for the in parents too, to question that, and maybe that's also a way to get in contact with the schools, because the parents, if they have a lot of parents asking them about a concept, maybe they will the schools themselves will try at least to have a concept or write a concept, and then we have them do their work. Actually.
Yeah, the book that Doug wrote was about, he developed the program for transitions at the American School of the Hague, ASH. And he was a counselor there. He's not there now, but people were coming there to learn and taking it to some international schools. So his first idea was to see if we could get schools certified as SPAN schools, like they certify IB. Mm-hmm. So that when a parent looks for schools, it would have that stamp. Well, that is a really big undertaking. And so it's like, what can we do, even if that's a goal out there? How do we get there? How do we make people aware? And so, I think there's a lot of people trying to do stuff, but if everybody could band together kind of in one, at least, name, it's like with FIGT, everybody's doing their own things, but we kind of all connect. We're not doing FIGT for people, although you could start a German FIGT. Are you starting that, Wiebke? That, because
there is one.
They're having these, that's what I was thinking. Maybe one had started.
But there are really lots of expats in Germany that created that. So they're more, but they also said it's so hard to have your international kid in a local German school. Mm-hmm. They were actually showing a lot of rage and disappointment and, about that. So actually that's a great partner to do the school work with.
Well, who else?
They have a lot of interest in that too.
Did I put you in contact with another group of German parents who contacted me? Some of them are Israelis living in, they're all something in the couple there. Some are Israelis married to Germans, some are Israeli couples, but they have, some of these same kind of issues they're trying to figure out for their kids, who of course have the added piece, how do you put together the Jewish German piece when, you know, the kid is half German, half Jew, and they go to school and kids say, and, you know, so that was why they contacted me, but they might be very interested in what you all are doing as far as in a bigger picture. How do we work together? Maybe not that you have to join groups, but how do you, they're informal. They have their little community, but it's the same questions of.
Would be great.
Rebecca,
to
you're
get in touch.
smiling. You think that's, I see Rebecca smiling. Are you?
What?
You look like you're thinking.
No, I think it's, I'm still, how can I say, I'm thinking about this awareness, yeah, because actually it's awareness on all levels. It's this awareness for schools, that is one point, and then I was now thinking awareness in the companies, because it's really difficult. Okay, finally, I think companies are kind of aware that it's a good idea to have an intercultural training before sending people abroad. Some of them even found out that it's good to give a coaching to the employees. Some of them found out that it's even a good idea to support the partner in whatever way. And very few even thought about the children. And so it's, you know,
Yep.
it's so much work to really raise this awareness. And if I was working for Volkswagen for a long time, quite big company, and I see that they somehow accepted after a long process that it's important that the family is happy and successful and fulfilled, and that there is different, so that the family might be also a reason that somebody ends an assignment and so on. But it's really difficult to put it into numbers. Like, okay, if you don't support the partner, 10% of your assignments will fail or something like that. It's difficult to get it down to that. And what I experienced in my time when I was responsible for expat families company-wise is that in most of the cases when the people really ended the assignment was when there were issues with the kids. Because the partner, they are, you know, adult woman maybe can deal with the situation, or she endures the situation or whatever. But if it comes to the kids, both parents usually get to the point that they say no, because it's the investment is too high. And I think it's so difficult to really get this into the companies. Angela can maybe even tell more about that. And then it's the same. Okay, oh yeah, we have to think about the children who need to get their high school degrees or something like that, because it's a problem when they come back. But nobody really accepts that it's difficult to move a kindergartner somewhere. And yeah, we were, when we prepared for this meeting, especially, we were really thinking about, okay, what is the best practice from all over the world, kind of, that we can really bring to the German market, not to make money with it, but to really help the children from this families.
I think that's a good question. And Angela, do you want to say anything for, you know, of what you're finding out? Because the other thing I'll say to you is this topic has never been done before in the history of the world. Okay. Nobody has ever had this much cross-cultural mobility ever, historically. So you are actually in the beginning of a brand new exploration of how do we do this? And even though I've worked with it, for 30 years, I feel like we're still at a beginning. I mean, if I look back, I think, okay, nobody even believed it 30 years ago. Okay, so at least we have a few people believing it. We also have way more people being involved like you guys who can spread the word and take it. But part of it is that I think we're used to following people, because at the beginning I thought, well, somebody needs to do something about this. And I thought, well, it's not going to be me. I mean, you know, I'm living in Africa then. I'm a nurse. I don't have any big anything. I just have my life and the way the world's, you know, worked out. But I mean, seriously, it's like, who am I to even think about this? And because surely, it's so obvious that there's all these, you know, brilliant people, but it hasn't been done before. And people are stuck in old ways of thinking about culture and about identity and about that. So that's the first problem. I tried to have something for academics once. It was the worst weekend of my life. I went home and cried the whole time. I thought, I'm just a fool to even think that I could even try and they just couldn't get past diversity and inclusion American style, which is all about how you look. And oh, it was awful. It was absolutely awful. And they want to fight with each other. And I just thought, I'm going to hide under a desk, and I'm going back to my everyday people who we can talk about these things. But I talked to one of them afterwards. I said, kind of like what happened. She said, just be glad you're not an academician so you can still think. I thought that's terrible. And the guy who did the iceberg, Gary Weaver, was there for part of it. And he's a wonderful man. He said, Ruth, the problem is that, I mean, all these people are trying to do research and they can't get in there because they said there's no research out there. I thought, but aren't you doing the research? Anyway, he said, the people form their theories and then they get their tenure by keeping those theories, you know, people saying it. So if somebody comes new, they can't publish because nobody's going to believe it. Anyway, I think that's starting to change. But I'm saying that don't put down what you're doing in the sense of having a group here who can think about it. And what you develop, you can also share with other people. You do speak English, where you can say, this is what we did, because everybody's trying to find the way. Okay, I can look at the theories, but I'm not so much the practitioner. You know, I go to schools and I watch some teachers turn it into great exercises for the kids. Okay, I think that's what teachers do. They take the theory and they figure it out how to apply it. That's what Angela's doing in her books. Okay, so that's not my job. My job is just to think about it. But at the same time, when people find these ways that are effective and share it, that's what's also growing now in the next level. And so you've got teachers, you've got therapists. I would think the therapists in Germany need a little help if they're like the therapists in America, who just don't believe it. They don't believe it. They don't understand it because they don't see that world. It's invisible. And so you got the therapists, you got the teachers, you've got HR. Yeah. You know, it's like all the people, that was the idea we had at FIGT at the beginning, was all the people who worked with these families could come and we'd all have this grand discussion, but the people who worked with them didn't come. It was just the people who lived it, you know. So you start where you are. And now a few have come, but you know, you just start and do the next thing. But anyway, so keep trying.
Thank you so much for your encouraging words. It makes us
it's
more
true.
proud.
Yeah, you should be proud. You should be proud. It's the only way I know to get it done, because up here, they're not seeing it. But down here, the people living it are seeing it and living it and saying there is an issue.
Yes. Yes. Do we have any more questions? Things that we've always wanted to ask Ruth van Reken.
Or tell me what
Do
you're
you
doing,
have
what
questions?
you're seeing. No, I'm interested in if you can ever break the glass ceiling in a corporate, that would be another huge success, because that has been absolute wall for years. Absolute wall. Everybody thinks they can prove to them that it's an issue, and because, like you said, Rebecca, you can put it in dollars and cents. I've seen some people try and do that, you know, every assignment, but for some reason, I don't think they really believe it. They're sort of so focused. But if corporations could even be taught to think about the family when they're making reassignments. The military seems to have a harder time. I don't know, because not a harder time, but those kids that I met in the American military have their cycles of separation are profoundly frequent, you know, and then even when they're in their home countries, the difference of culture of being in the military and a dominant culture, at least, you know, you're on the base and that has its own stuff. But like I've been saying, you're kind of at that next level of complexity where the kids are going to international schools, but it's not a German school. It's not a German culture per se. And that might be why when they come back, you know, they're specifically mentioning the German mentality, because that's different than most probably American-based schools. It would be, you probably have the Western thing could be there, you know, whereas the kids from Asia have a really different worldview in the two places they live. But no, I think you're 100% on target. And what I love is that you have enthusiasm, but also that you have each other. This is a team thing. And what it sounds to me like, you've got a great team with the different skill sets and the different avenues and the different places you can touch and the different groups that you're touching and doing. And that, I think, is really important in getting things done, because you can't do it by yourself. But when you work together, you know, and I can send you the links to other people, you know, these other friends in Germany, just saying that there's a big group. There's probably a bigger group than you know. I've done some schools in Germany. I did some stuff in Frankfurt International Schools and Stuttgart and Dusseldorf, I think. And so there's people there that care about this, I know, and probably would love to know that there's a group of people like you that have formed an institute to actually try and do this in Germany instead of importing us foreigners. And, you know, as I believe 100% and 1000%, there's so much wisdom in each group. Because as you guys share, you know, you've come to these conclusions, and then you know how it applies in Germany. And that's something somebody else doesn't know. But, you know, when I've gone to schools, I say, you really don't need me back. Once you know there's a topic, you're the people living it out in this place. You get the principles, and then how do you apply them? How do you sort them? I've seen I saw somebody in Rome. I went to her school, but I had met her in conferences, and she went back and really put this throughout her school in terms of kids being aware of their story. And, you know, these kids were normalized, totally normalized. Like, oh yeah, I've got 5 passports, but you know, my mom's from here, my dad's from here, and everybody's from here, and everything's fine, and you know, it's okay. I go, oh. So that they could tell their story without shame. And it was normal. It was like a normal story. And I thought, actually, in today's world, it is a normal story, except we don't know it's normal yet. So I love what you're doing. Keep doing it.
We
Let me know
love what you did and what you're doing.
I'm on the cheerleading part of life now.
Yes, thank you.
My job to try and encourage the next generation, because the job's too big for anybody, but there's still so much to go. I mean, we just barely started. So, and then COVID.
Very grateful for everything you've accomplished. And
well, it's been fun. I've had an incredibly interesting life. I've met incredibly interesting people. And I thought I was just going to be a nurse in the village in Africa when I went to school. So I thought, what happened?
You've touched many more lives.
Anyway, thanks. But thanks for having me, and tell Stefanie I'm sorry I missed her, but maybe another time.
Yes.
So thank you.
Shall we take a...
Tell me after you get some programs going, let's meet again in a few months or 6 months or something, and tell me what happened.
Yes.
I'd love to know.
Great. We'll keep you informed. Keep you updated.
No, that's great.
Shall we take a picture?
Sure.
Anne, are you doing the picture?
I am.
Okay.
One more. So, smile. Okay, that looks good.
Yeah, I don't like pictures anymore because I'm supposed to look 20, and I don't think I look 20 anymore, but that's okay. You know, you have this image of, and the first time I thought, what happened? I thought, I think I just got old, but that's okay.
I saved that pictures under the number of 20. So just
Yay.
Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
yeah.
Have a
Thank
good
you
day
for
or
your
evening or whatever
encouragement.
you're doing. I'm at what, 12? What am I? 12:17. Oh, 1:17. Good. Okay, got time.
I'm Flu.
Have a good evening. All right. Bye-bye.
You
Thank
too.
you very
Thank
Have
you
a good
so
day.
much.
Bye,
Bye.
Ruth.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.